Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat, and today we're talking about the best 3 color commanders. Let's jump right into it. So first up, we're talking about Halden and Paco. This 3-color pair is a lot of fun, especially with the randomness that comes along with it. So Halden reads, you may play non-creature spells from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. And it's partnered with Paco, which has haste, and whenever it attacks, we're going to exile the top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on it. And then we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Paco for each non-creature card exiled this way. So non-creature cards are the name of the game. So for example, we can actually exile cards like Memory Lapse. This is a counter spell for 2 mana. We're able to counter target spell, and then we can put that card on top of its owner's library instead of that player's graveyard, which is really sweet because whenever Paco attacks again, we're going to be able to exile that card and later be able to cast it. So if our opponent has a really crazy spell that happens to be non-creature, we can be able to cast that. There's also cards like Bear Umbra. Whenever this creature attacks, we get to untap all of our lands. And it has Totem Armor, which if our creature would be destroyed, it's actually going to destroy this aura instead. It also gives it +2/+2, and attaching this to Paco is a great idea. Paco's going to have a huge amount of power and toughness. Adding that +2/+2 and being able to untap our lands is a great way to be able to cast those spells we just exiled with Paco. So for even more non-creature spells, there's a lot of ramp that can go into this. We have Cultivate, Rampant Growth, and Kodama's Reach. We're going to get our basic lands from our library onto the battlefield tap, and by getting more mana, that means the bigger the spells we can cast, or even multiple spells we can cast during our turn. Or if we happen to exile instants, we can actually cast those at any time. For example, Deflecting Swat or Cyclonic Rip, or even Counterspell. If they have instant speed, we're able to cast it as though it had instant speed, but when it comes to sorcery speed, we still have to obey that. So I really like exiling everybody's top card of their library, so I really like Itali Primal Storm in this deck. When it attacks, we're going to exile the top card of each player's library, so that sounds very familiar with Paco, and then we can cast them without paying their mana cost. So they can be a creature spell, non-creature, whatever they are. If it's a land, we won't be able to play it, but this is also a 6/6 dinosaur, so it's going to be dealing a lot of damage. Another great card is Stolen Strategy. This is an enchantment where we exile the top card of each opponent's library at our upkeep, and until end of turn we can cast non-land cards from among those exiled cards, and we can spend mana as though it were any mana to cast those spells. So yeah, we still have to pay the mana cost, but now we're able to cast those creatures. And again, if you love casting everyone else's spells, this is a great card for you. Or how about Mind's Dilation? Whenever an opponent casts their first spell each turn, so that means on your turn, on another opponent's turn, on their turn, that player exiles the top card of their library, and if it's a non-land card, we can cast it without paying its mana cost. This is another one of my favorites. I love being able to play my opponent's spells, so if I were to build this deck, you're going to see a lot of cards like this. We also have Precognition Field. For 3 and a blue, it's an enchantment. We can look at the top card of our library at any time, and we can also cast the top card of our library if it's an instant or sorcery, and then we can pay 3 mana to exile the top card of our library. Now, why that's important is if it's a land and we don't need to draw a land, we can get that out of the way for 3 mana by exiling it, and hopefully we can get a non-creature spell, so Paco can exile it with a fetch counter, and later we can cast it with Halden. It's very likely we're actually going to kill our opponents with Paco because we have cards like Kessig Wolfrun, or even Rogue's Passage. Giving Paco trample and +X/+0 is really good, or even making Paco unblockable because Paco gets counters very easily. And then if you really care about a lot of combat phases, I recommend Seize the Day, Morog, Fury of Akum, and Relentless Assault. This is going to make it where we're getting even more counters on Paco, even more spells to cast, and a lot of damage that we're going to be dealing. Next, we're going to be talking about Mael the Anima. For red, green, and white, we can pay 3 in red, green, and white to look at the top 5 cards of our library, and we can put a creature card with power 5 or greater from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest onto the bottom of your library in any order. So again, this is another commander that loves randomness. So we can end up having huge creatures on our battlefield just for 6 mana. So for example, we have Terastodon. This is a 9/9, so it meets that power requirement, but also when it enters the battlefield, we're destroying up to 3 target non-creature permanents, so we can get rid of the Ristic Study, we can get rid of a land of theirs, whatever we need to take care of. This is a great card to do it, especially because it's 8 mana. It's as if we're saving 2 mana just by using Mael's ability. We can also put more creatures onto our battlefield from our hand with cards like Elvish Piper. We can pay green and tap it to put a creature card from our hand into play or onto the battlefield. A really sweet card to have in this deck is Kodama of the East Tree. Not only is it a 6/6, so we can grab it with Mael, Mael, but it has reach, and whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you can put a permanent with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. So whenever one of our huge creatures enter our battlefield with Mael or from whatever ability, we can just put whatever permanent with CMC equal or lesser onto the battlefield, so we can actually start dropping lands from our hand or creatures with CMC equal or lesser. It's just a crazy card to have in this deck, and I really recommend it. Now, Seedborn Muse. This is a great one. During each other player's untap step, we are untapping as well. So that means we can use Mael's ability every player's turn, which will get nutty, and this is a great card to promote that. A great way to protect our huge creatures, because you know we're going to have to be the target after all of this, is Spearbreaker Behemoth. So it's indestructible, and also we can pay 1 mana to give target creature with power 5 or greater indestructible this turn. For 1 mana, that is insane, because in response we can start just paying 1 mana to protect our huge creatures, which most of the deck or all of it is going to be huge creatures with power 5 or greater, and I really love this card. We can also make it where our creatures with power 5 or greater can't be countered with cards like Spellbreaker Behemoth, so if we actually have to cast creatures from our hand, this is going to protect them, and the spell also can't be countered as well. We can draw a lot of cards with Garruk's Uprising, so whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters our battlefield, we're drawing a card. Our creatures now have trample with this, which giving our creatures trample is very important in a deck like this because they're huge creatures. Not all of them are going to come with trample, so this is a really versatile card to have in the deck. Xenagos, God of Rebels, is another crazy powerful one. At the beginning of combat on our turn, we can give another target creature +X/+X, where X is that creature's power, so if it's a 5/5, it's now a 10/10, so if you want to be dealing a lot of damage, this is a great card to have. And it also can be picked out by Mael's ability because it is a creature while it's in our library. Another super great card is Lurking Predators. It is 6 mana for this enchantment, but whenever an opponent casts a spell, which they're going to do probably at least once a turn, we can reveal the top card of our library, and if it's a creature card, we get to put it onto the battlefield for free, and otherwise you may put it on the bottom of your library. So luckily it's not a must, so if we really need that land on top of our library, we can still keep that. One card I think is underrated is Quartzwood Crasher. For 5 mana, we get a 6/6 dinosaur beast with trample. Whenever one or more creatures you control with trample deal combat damage to a player, create an XX green dinosaur beast creature token with trample, where X is the damage those creatures dealt to that player. Now I know this isn't a trample themed deck, but this has trample on it, which is really sweet. So if we deal them 6 damage, we're making a 6/6 green dinosaur beast creature token with trample. So that means even more ways to make tokens off of this card, and I really love this one, especially because it's $1. I think this is very underrated. So if you love huge creatures and finding great ways to cheat them out, this is a great one for you. Next, we're talking about Marianne Re-Bari. For white, blue, black, we have a 1/1 that does not untap during our untap phase. We can tap it and gain control of target creature. We lose control of that creature if we lose control of Marianne, and if it leaves play or leaves the battlefield or becomes untapped, we have to bury the creature or sacrifice the creature we had control of. And as I mentioned before, I love ways to gain control or use my opponent's spells, so I really like repeating this effect, and we can do that with Freed from the Real, Vizier of Tumbling Sands, and Pemin's Aura. For 1 blue, or even just tapping Vizier of Tumbling Sands, we're able to untap our commander, so we'll sacrifice the card we just gained control of, but that means it's going to be in our opponent's graveyard. So if they're not able to abuse their creatures in their graveyard, these are great ways to start having our opponents sacrifice their creatures pretty much. But whenever their creatures die, we can actually have them return to the battlefield under our control with a Darker Valkyrie, and so that way we permanently keep them, and that means we can untap Marianne, gain control of another one of their creatures, and just repeat the cycle over and over. It does seem a little bit slow, but we can start gaining control of some super awesome creatures. And since there's a lot of cards that help us untap our commander, let's throw in Arcanus the Omnipotent. When we tap it, we draw 3 cards, so for 1 blue, we can draw 3. So it's as if we are casting Ancestral Recall. I know this is a 6 mana spell, but after a while, we can pay 1 blue to untap it to draw 3. It's just a really sweet thing to do. Or whenever a land enters our battlefield with Retreat to Coral Helm, we can untap or tap target creature. We're most likely going to untap our creatures, but we can always tap down our opponents or even scry one off of this, and I really like how versatile this one is. Or whenever we gain control of our opponent's creatures with our commander, we can cast things like Ghostly Flicker, which will turn those creatures under our control, and then Marianne no longer sees those creatures, so now we can untap Marianne and gain control of another one of their creatures, and we won't have to sacrifice the one we previously gained control of. Also with Conjurer's Closet, at the beginning of our end step, we can exile a creature we control, and then it's going to return to the battlefield under our control, so we no longer have to pay 3 mana to do this just once. We can do this at our end step every single turn. So if you love to gain control of your opponent's creatures and do it very efficiently, this is a great commander for you. Next, we're talking about Admiral Beckett Brass for 1 blue, black, red. It's a 3/3 human pirate with other pirates you control get +1/+1. At the beginning of your end step, gain control of target non-land permanent controlled by a player who has dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates this turn. So this is pirate tribal, and again, gaining control of our opponent's stuff. And it's also promoting pirates because they're getting +1/+1. So we have to have cards like Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. Whenever 1 or more pirates we control deal damage to our opponents, we get to create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage. So if we hit 3 of our opponents, we make 3 treasures, which is exactly what we want to do. Making more mana, our pirates are going to get +1/+1, and we can start gaining control of their stuff. But it is important that we attack one opponent, because our commander specifically says when a player who has dealt combat damage by 3 or more pirates, so it has to be one opponent with at least 3 pirates, dealing them combat damage. We can also use Zara Renegade Recruiter. When it attacks, we look at the defending player's hand, and we can put a creature card from it onto the battlefield under our control tapped and attacking that player, or planeswalker they control. It is going to go back to their hand at our end step, but still, we're taking their creatures, we're dealing them combat damage with Zara because this is a flyer, and it's going to be very likely it's going to get through. We can also have an additional combat step with cards like Port Razor. When it deals combat damage to a player, we get to untap each creature we control, and there's an additional combat phase after this one. And this can't attack a player that's already been attacked this turn. This is perfect for the deck. We also have Stormfleet Sprinter. It has haste and it can't be blocked, so this is a guaranteed way that we can deal combat damage to one of our opponents. We can also win the game with cards like Revel in Riches. Whenever an opponent's creature dies, we can create a treasure token, and if we have 10 or more treasure tokens at our upkeep, we get to win the game, which we're already making a bunch of treasure tokens because this is a pirate-themed deck. We also have Captivating Crew. For 4 mana, we can gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. We get to untap it, and it gains haste until end of turn. We can only do it on our turn, but still, this is a great card because it's a pirate, it's doing exactly what we want, and when we deal combat damage to a player, we're going to start be able to take their non-land permanents. Now, since we want to deal combat damage, I really recommend cards like Reconnaissance Mission. Whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get to draw a card. So if we deal combat damage with 3 creatures, we're drawing 3 cards off of this. This is a great enchantment, and especially great on a budget. Now we have to talk about Shared Animosity. For 2 and a red, it's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a type with it. This can get insane, especially if we're attacking with 3 pirates. This is going to be a lot of damage just from a 3 mana enchantment. This is one I really have to recommend. So if you're looking to gain control of your opponent's stuff and you want a bit of a pirate theme added to it, this is a great commander for you. Next, we're talking about Zaxarella the Exemplary. For 1 black, green, blue, we have a 2/3 Nightmare Hydra with Death Touch. We can also tap it to add 2 mana of any one color, and whenever we cast a spell with X mana in its mana cost, we create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, and then we're going to put X +1/+1 counters on it. So X spells are very important. So we have cards like Animus Awakening. We're going to reveal the top X cards of our library and put all lands from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. Which that's insane, because if we put 4 into the X, we're going to make a 4/4 green Hydra just off of ramping from this, which is insane in my opinion. So yes, it has the Hydra theme to it. So for example, we have Genesis Hydra. For X green green, it's a 0/0 plant Hydra. Whenever you cast this spell, we're going to reveal the top X cards of our library, and we can put a non-land permanent with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. So we get a free spell out of this. It's going to enter with X counters on it, and then we're going to make another Hydra off of our commander. This is just a really insane deck, and it really promotes X spells because we're getting a huge amount of tokens. Or if we want to take care of our opponent's threats, we have Curse of the Swine. For X blue blue, it's a sorcery. We can exile X target creatures, and for each creature exiled, this way its controller creates a 2/2 green boar creature token. So we're taking care of our opponent's creatures. We're also making a green Hydra from this. Yeah, it's just crazy. Or even one of my favorites, Villainous Wealth. For X black green blue, target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library, and we can cast those cards that are X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. We make a Hydra from this. We're casting our opponent's spells. This is just a great card in any Sultai deck. Or if we really want to end the game, we can do so with Exsanguinate and Torment of Hellfire. These are X spells, and these are really great ways to finish a game if we have a huge amount of mana. And since we're making a huge amount of counters, we have Corpsejack Menace. Instead of making a Hydra with 5 +1/+1 counters, we actually make twice that many. So now we have a 10/10 just by having Corpsejack Menace out. And this happens every time we're making those Hydras from our commander. We can make our creatures unblockable with cards like Herald of Secret Streams. Creatures with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. So now all those hydras we're making from our commander are unblockable, or even the hydras that we cast from our hand, like Colonian Hydra. It's going to enter the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it, and when it attacks, we double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature we control. That means our tokens and every other hydra with +1/+1 counters on them. So if you love +1/+1 counters, hydras, or just being in Sultai, this is a great deck for you. If you love your creatures entering the battlefield, I have to recommend Rune of the Hidden Realm for 2 green, white, blue. It's a 4/4 Rhino Soldier. It has Vigilance and Trample. We can pay 2, tap it, and exile another target creature. Return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So this could be our opponent's creatures, but mostly we're going to focus on our creatures. So ETBs are the name of the game. We have Muldrifter, Cloud Blazer, Coiling Oracle, Farhaven Elf, you name it. Anything with the ETB, we're going to be putting in this deck. We also have Soul Herder. At the beginning of our end step, we can exile another target creature we control and return that to the battlefield under its control. There's also a way that we can exile our creatures and have them enter the battlefield with an instant speed card such as Ephemerate. And it has rebound, so at our upkeep, we get to do this again. And we get to cast it for free, even though it is 1 white, which doesn't seem like a lot. Not paying mana for this sweet ability is really good. A really cool card is Thragtusk. When it enters the battlefield, we gain 5 life, but also when it leaves the battlefield, it's making a 3/3 green piece creature token. And so whenever we exile this with our cards, we gain 5 life, and we're making a 3/3 piece creature token, so this is just a great card to have in it. And then we have Brago King Eternal, which is pretty much, we target whatever non-land permanent we have, and we return those to the battlefield if this deals combat damage to a player, which it most likely will because it's flying, and it's only 2 damage, so our opponents are most likely going to take the damage. But after a while, or hopefully it'll be too late for them to realize, Brago is just an insane card, and they do not want to take combat damage from this guy. We can make it where our opponents skip their combat phase with cards like Stonehorn Dignitary. I really like this card because we can make it where our opponents can attack us each turn. Now it is target opponent, but still, I love the fact that we can postpone the damage that they're going to be dealing to us. And since our commander has a way to tap itself, we should be able to untap it with cards like Kiora's Follower or Seedborn Muse. We can be able to untap our commander at each player's untap step, or a one-time thing with Kiora's Follower until we're able to untap it again. Now since we have a lot of creatures entering our battlefield, we have to talk about Aura Shards. When a creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is going to take care of their Rhystic Studies, their Smothering Tithes, any great artifact or enchantment they may have. So if you love being able to have your creatures ETB, I really recommend Rune of the Hidden Realm. Last we're talking about Xyrus the Writhing Storm. For 2 green, blue, red, it's a 3/5 Snake Leviathan with flying. Whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Whenever Xyrus the Writhing Storm deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. Now normally this is built as a wheel deck, which can be fun for the player playing the commander, but ultimately your opponents will not have as much fun, so I don't really recommend to build it that way, but I'm not saying you shouldn't. So we make creatures when our opponents draw cards, so I really recommend a group hug theme. We have cards like Dictate of Krufix and Rites of Flourishing. This is going to help our opponents draw an additional card, and we're also drawing an additional card as well. And we can draw even more cards with Skull Clamp. For 1 mana, equipping this to one of our snakes, we're drawing 2 cards. Skull Clamp is super powerful, not just in this deck, but really any deck that makes 1/1s. And since we're drawing a huge amount of cards, we can have cards like Psychosis Crawler. Whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life, and our hand size is going to be its power and toughness. There's also Edric Spymaster of Tress. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of our opponents, its controller may draw a card, which will promote our opponents hitting each other and not us. They're also drawing more cards, and we're making even more tokens off of Edric. When we finally want to end the game, because we're going to have a huge amount of creatures, we have cards like Beastmaster Ascension. Whenever a creature we control attacks, we can put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension, and as long as it has 7 or more counters on it, creatures we control get +5/+5. So those 1/1 snakes are now 6/6 snakes. Yeah, this is a dumb card, especially for 3 mana. So I really recommend just playing this as soon as you get those 7 creatures that are able to attack, and then we're able to pretty much just end the game with this card. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to purchase this deck, you can do so through TCG Player. When you purchase the deck or any cards through the link in the description, you help out the channel at no additional cost to you. You can become a patron and start seeing your name at the end of these videos, and get a free exclusive Ultra Sleeve each month. You can also get 5% off your Ultra Sleeve order when you use the code triplemangothreat. Be sure to comment down below and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.